like right now he's working on planning a hackathon with jump trading next semester, and hopefully we'll have like a bunch of different universities come out, and we can like rent out a bus for hacker teams to go out, and we can host a hackathon at Jump Trading's office in downtown Chicago. So we have a lot of like cool community events brewing like that. A lot of blockchain summits, or a blockchain summit, and hopefully that'll be pretty big as well. But in general, it's really cool to see like a bunch of new members getting a lot of responsibility and running with it. Yeah, that's been a really cool part. Something I'm excited to see continue to grow. And we'll like be recruiting next semester too. So for any of you guys that are like foaming at the mouth, wanting to like plan a hackathon, like we'll probably take on, I don't know how many members next semester, but we'll take on some people. Yeah. Right. I wonder how many people are on the. All right, cool.
Hey guys, I'm back.
Hey Pat, I'm gonna pull up right here. There we go. I'm gonna pin your screen, and then we should be good to go. Does anyone know how to do full screen here? I'll turn on our camera too, so you can see. We got like kind of a squad here. Anyone?
The three dots, change layout. The bottom next to the screen.
Oh, let's go, Pat. Thanks. Full screen. Yeah, it should be solid and change layout. All right, sweet. So I'm gonna kind of like be interviewing from the side here. But I'll like, yeah, it might be a little bit awkward, but it'll be fine. I like the gear that you're wearing, and I appreciate you coming out. If you can't tell, we have like around 80 students here, something like that. Yeah, we've got a solid. So hopefully you don't get too nervous. I know, like, you know, you being the crisis manager of a huge company might be a little bit nerve-wracking, but you know, I can understand the college jitters that you get.
You know, I've survived the congressional hearing. I'll survive this.
All right. So, yeah, with that being said, I kind of have three goals for this interview. Number one is to provide students with a path, like highlight your path to non-technical success in a technical field, or a field that seems very technical. Number two is to give a glimpse into what the future of Web3 looks like in your eyes and in Binance's eyes. And then number three is to get some relatable and actionable advice that everyone here can take with them and implement into their lives or into their future aspirations. How's that sound?
Perfect. Where do you want me to start?
Could you start just by telling us about your journey going from a University of Illinois poli-sci student to eventually becoming the chief strategy officer of Binance?
Wow. So
yes,
yeah, it's fascinating to me. But you know, if this was, oh geez, has it been 20 years? Yeah, it's been almost 20 years since I left U of I. Matter of fact, 20 years ago, I'd probably be sitting in that classroom right now. I would have been a sophomore or a junior. You know, and at some point, I'm sure you're going to ask me for some advice on all of this stuff. And the reality is, I never thought I'd be sitting in this position. So, you know, coming out of U of I, you know, my honest to God thought was I was going to either work at the State Department or the CIA or God knows where, right? And, you know, my dream job didn't become a reality for me. And so I took a job in finance and worked as an emerging markets analyst, and learned that I really hate finance, and I was bad at it. I was really bad at it. I mean, I hated every minute of it. And so, you know, 2 years of that, I was kind of looking around like, you know, what do you do at this point when everything you thought you were going to do didn't come to fruition, and then what I was doing like wasn't working? You know, I decided to go to grad school. I knew that I really liked, you know, political science. I liked economics, and I knew that I wanted to work in policy in some way. So I went back to grad school, got a master's degree in public policy. And originally I was a law student, And after my first year of law, I had a meeting with essentially a career guidance counselor, and he asked me, he goes, "So what kind of law do you want to practice?" I'm like, "I want to practice law." He's like, "What do you mean you want to practice law?" I'm like, "I want to work in policy and politics." He's like, "Then why are you getting a law degree?" And I was like, "Well, that's what I thought I was supposed to do." He's like, "No, you should probably drop out of law school and maybe get like something else." So I was like, "Oh God." So then at the last second, I pivoted and I added econ onto the policy degree. And while I was there, I did a lot of work in Russian and oil gas relations in Europe. And the European Commission called me. They had seen some of my research and they asked me to come out and finish my last year of grad school in Brussels and work for their version of the State Department. So I was like, "Oh, okay, sure. When do you need me?" 3 days. All right. I'd never left the country before in my entire life. So my parents helped me buy a plane ticket. I flew to Brussels with a backpack and a duffel bag with clothes. I had nowhere to stay. My first night I slept on a park bench, true story, until I finally found an apartment on day 2 that I could move into and afford. And I worked at the commission for about a year. And then in 2008, Russia invaded Georgia in August. And basically the European Commission goes on vacation in August. So my boss at the time asked me, he goes, "Would you be willing to go to the front and do all the policy communications and do all of the PR work?" And I was like, "Well, I've never done PR before." He's like, "Well, don't worry about it. Just say what you would say to the president." I'm like, "Never talked to the president." He's like, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." So I got on a plane, landed in a conflict zone and managed that for, 2 months of the conflict. And then a PR firm in New York reached out to me and said, "Hey, you did a really nice job in this crisis management work. Would you ever think about doing that full time?" And I was like, "Well, I really kind of want to work in policy. This is what I like doing." And I kind of thought about it. I was like, I really liked this. It was kind of fun. It was different. And they were looking for someone who could basically do crisis management for foreign governments. So I was like, okay. So I left Brussels and I moved out to New York and split time in Chicago. And I worked for Ketchum's crisis practice. I worked on everything from the first major cybersecurity breach, Target. I actually worked on Penn State before the Penn State Sandusky issues were even known to the public. I was there 2 months beforehand, working with their board. I was in the room when we decided to fire Coach Paterno. Got to do some really cool stuff. And then another firm out in DC reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have a big client named GE. We'd like you to come out and help them think through how they deal with crises." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll move to DC." So packed up my stuff, got on a plane. We moved out to DC, and from there, I worked at a crisis shop there for a couple of years, and then I worked at then GE hired me in house, and I managed global public affairs and special projects. And then Donald Trump got elected, and the entire manufacturing industry looked at it and said, "Well, this is a big crisis because all of our people make things and we sell things to foreign governments. And the president, this new presidential candidate and now president, is saying, well, we shouldn't be trading with foreign governments like this. And all of our people are voting for him. And their jobs depend on those things being traded with foreign governments and foreign populations." And so they made me a White House lobbyist, which I had no experience doing, but they kind of pointed me to the door and said, "The White House is down the street. Here's some names you should go take some meetings in. Here's what we'd like you to tell them." And so I had a very strange job being an executive branch lobbyist through the first 3 years of the Trump administration. We'll save that for another talk and a lot of drinks. That was fascinating. And then eventually, I worked for another firm called Hillman. I was their chief innovation officer, oversaw their global crisis practice. I managed the WHO's crisis center through COVID. And I also worked for Facebook and Amazon were 2 of my clients. And all of a sudden, a guy named CZ reached out to me over email, said that one of his contacts on the board of Facebook suggested he have a conversation with me. He asked me if I'd fly out to Singapore, and I flew out to Singapore and met CZ, who's our founder and CEO. And he asked me, "How would you feel about coming over and helping us build a better communications mousetrap at the world's largest crypto exchange?" And I took a look at what crypto was and what the possibilities were as an industry and all the challenges that went with it. And I realized that there was never going to be another industry that was going to be as game changing and as revolutionary as Web3 is going to be. And that this was probably my one shot to be a part of it at the ground level. And so moved again back to Chicago. Got on a plane. We moved back here. We've been here ever since, and I've been working for Binance now for a year and 4 months, and I've never looked back.
Pretty sweet. That's like a pretty. I have like a lot of different questions that branch off from that. I'll hold back from like your Web3 predictions because you seem to be somewhat bullish. And I wanna reel it back because you talked a lot about getting thrown into a lot of different situations, and then somehow you do really well in that situation, and another opportunity happens to fall into your lap. I'm sure it's not quite that simple, but obviously you're getting thrown into a lot of new situations and finding success in them. What mentalities or models or frameworks or what do you think attributes to your success in like jumping into these new environments and figuring it out?
Failure time and time again. I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of very successful people in my life. Got to know, Jeff Bezos really closely, very close, obviously, to CZ, who's my boss now. I had plenty of opportunities to interact with Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey through our investment in Twitter. And then just a whole host of other people that you've never heard of that are just very, very successful people in Washington, London, Brussels. And the one thing that I've always found with all of them is that their ability to fail and learn from their failures has always been most critical in their development. It was most critical in mine. Good Lord. That story that I just walked through was paved with failure time again. And I think, for me, being comfortable failing, making sure that I always learn from those failures was easily the most important lesson that I had in my career, because it allowed me to have a certain level of confidence that it would be okay if I failed, that it wouldn't always be over. It allowed me to be fairly nimble. And it also allowed me the confidence to say yes to things that were oftentimes really uncertain. Leaving Brussels, which at the time was like a dream job for somebody who wanted to work in policy. I was literally the only American citizen who was working in their version of the State Department, and definitely the only one that was working with the top level security clearance. And so to leave that job and like jump and take a pay cut, come back to the States and do something that was different, there was a risk, but I felt confident that if I failed, that either I didn't do well enough, or the job just didn't turn out correctly, or it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, I could always learn from it and take the amalgamations of all those failures and successes, and I'd find something else down the line. And then, secondly, anytime I meet somebody, especially when I meet smart people, there's still two professors, from my Illinois days, they're not in Illinois anymore, that I still talk to pretty regularly, actually. And I've always kept those people in my life that provided me counsel, that helped me think about things differently. I reach out to them all the time and I ask for help on things. And, a lot of my relationship building started when I was at U of I, and those relationships are really important to me, and they help guide me and make, good decisions and help me get over bad decisions. I think that's the other thing that's really critical is just making sure you never spoil a relationship.
So from what it sounds like, there's two big traits that you've taken away or think attribute to your success. And number one is overcoming failure and learning from that. And number two is maintaining and retaining connections, and continuing to curate them. I have a question on both. So on the first part, could you talk about a little bit more actionable when you do fail, right? Because it's we all know that you should fail and you should overcome it, but it's still very difficult to get to get used to that, and also to figure out what you're supposed to learn when you do fail. So how do you approach uncovering the insights of a failure?
So I'll go back and I'll give you one specific failure that really comes to mind. And again, there's many, but I was working at Ketchum, and at the time we had just wrapped up Penn State. And after we had done Penn State, everyone wanted to hire us. It was the biggest crisis in history, and so there was just lots of job offers out there. And I took a job that was paying me twice what I was getting paid with a much smaller firm on kind of a promise. I met with the owner, I met with the other senior leaders, and there were some red lights, but the money was kind of always oh, well, this is going to be great for us. I'm going to buy a nice car. I can maybe afford a condo now. And, I took that job and I lasted 8 weeks. It immediately started. I was constantly, getting into conflict with one of the founders of the company. The work was not fulfilling to me because of how they measured success. And like I always tell everybody, it was a mutual decision to part ways. He very much fired me. But after that happened, I took a step back and I literally, going back to my point number 2, I reached out to a guy named Pete Marino. He's now the global strategy officer at Molson Coors, who was somebody I had met through the agency. This was before his days as a C-suite at Molson Coors. And I said, Pete, what do I even do with this? And, he reassured me, he goes, don't worry, this is a part of it. It's a failure, but it's okay. He said, take some time and think through why this didn't work out and where you would have made decisions differently. And then when you start thinking about where you want to go, like make sure you don't make those same mistakes. And I literally took some time and I typed out in a couple different Word docs, like what that job was, what I hate about it, things where I made mistakes very clearly and how I managed personal relationships. And when I looked for that next job, I realized that what I really cared about was a couple of things. I wanted to be able to have a job in something in my field that would allow me to test things out, to do things differently. I didn't want to get somebody else's playbook and just execute against their playbook. I wanted to build my own. So I needed to find a firm that was going to be, a little bit younger, looking to get into crisis management, willing to take a shot on a younger guy. And I also knew that I really care about culture. Like I wanted to be able to have an open culture, a fun culture, to be able to be a little bit even jocular with my colleagues. And so that allowed me to really narrow down into where I was going to go to next. I ended up with this small little firm that ended up being kind of transformative for me. We were tiny. We were 40 people. And we ended up being the first firm of that size, of less than 400 people, to ever win Global Agency of the Year for some work that I had done for the Belizean Tourism Board. When Breaking Bad, when the final season came out, they decided to send him to Belize, a euphemism for murder. And John McAfee was running around claiming that, the Belizean government was after him. And I got to do some really great, just really outside the box, strategic thinking around crisis management. And that allowed me to just refine my approach. And so, that's kind of how I learned from that mistake and set myself on a path by being able to figure out exactly, where I went wrong and how I can correct it in the future.
So just to kind of recap for people is when you do fail, to one, get normalized with that feeling, 2, to have some support system or person or people that you can rely on to bounce your thoughts and ideas off of and get your head straight, and then to reflect by yourself and figure out and dig deep into what you truly value, and then based on that final reflection is how you model your perspective for your future job. Is that a fair
assessment?
And then the second question that I had, based on the connections and the importance of connections, especially for college kids, because you hear about this and networking is important, but it's often this thrown around term of oh, you've got a network, and what that usually comes down to is sending cold DMs or emails to people on LinkedIn. And from what it sounds like is that's not your definition of networking or maintaining connections. So could you talk about the importance for college kids and for their professional success in maintaining connections, and then how you approach it to get opportunities? Because from what it sounds like is you, through connections, got opportunities rather than massively putting your name out there and being hey, I'm open for hire.
Yeah.
And you seem to have found better opportunities from it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so now I'm in the position where I have to hire people. We went from being a company of 400 people just 3 years ago to now 8,000, and our biggest challenge is hiring. And the way the job market works now, I mean, let's be frank, it sucks. Having to go through these awful online forms that take forever to fill out, and you fill out the damn form 1,000 different times. It's a miserable process. I never found a job that way, and I've been through it. That kind of model started right when I got out of undergrad, and it sucked then. It sucks today. When I was when I was trying to get into communications, what I did was I went to as many different events that I knew were going to put me into proximity with other people who had those shared interests, right? I went to a PRSA event, which actually where I met Pete Marino, who would end up becoming a huge, huge person in my life. CZ would actually tell you that he got into crypto very bizarrely. He went to a random convention in Salt Lake City. It was like 2011, I think, maybe 2012. And he ended up meeting Brian Armstrong and Vitalik and all of these guys, and Charles Hodgkins, all these guys were transforming this industry. And they were just at this small little Salt Lake City event. There was like 150 people there, and a bunch of them sat and got drinks in the bar. And they're still all friends today. They still all talk, they compete, but everyone's actually very close. And so, finding ways to take yourself from being totally focused on online dialogues and look for those opportunities. When I joined, I heard you guys talking about hackathons. Go to those. Even if you're not someone who is like pursuing an engineering degree and is looking to get into blockchain, whether it's through like comms or operations or finance or security, there's a million different ways to get into this industry, in any other industry. Go to those events. We have things called meetups across the country and across the globe. Go to a meetup, meet people at Binance, talk to them, say, hey, how do you get a job? Those are the opportunities that are going to open up doors for you in the future. And you might just meet some other random student or someone who's a couple years older than you who works at a small little startup, and you strike up a conversation. He's like, hey, we're looking for, an intern. We could pay you just enough to kind of live, but it might open up other doors for you. Like, that's an opportunity. And I can't tell you that people don't get jobs just by reaching out over LinkedIn, and you should do that. You should, if you see people are talking about interesting conversations, you should throw your opinion up there for sure. But I think that I've always found that the best jobs, and you find the best people by working through your network. I always look to my network. When I'm looking to hire somebody, I'm like, I go to my VP, Brad Jaffe. I say, Brad, we need someone who does this. Who do you know that you've worked with? And he goes back into his network and his Rolodex. He's like, okay, I knew this guy. He was really good. I knew this woman. She was really good. Like, let's hire her. So, for you, as you guys start to, pull together, your kind of career path, the broader your network that you create, the more likelihood that you're going to end up tapping one of those people who are eventually going to open a door for you. And that's how I suggest everybody kind of like pursue their own life goals. It's just by constantly making those connections everywhere and wherever you can, and finding opportunities to be in a space to have that catalytic experience with people, I think is critical.
That's pretty good news for what we're trying to do at Illini Blockchain, right? Having all of these different community events, and this is like kind of a side tangent, but like hopefully this is the goal of these events. Is like, one, we get to learn from Patrick as well, but then after the events, you get to make a new friend. You add him on Snapchat, you start working on a project together, and something cool really happens, or something really cool happens.
I even want to say something.
Yeah,
Patrick, it's Austin over here. Yuting is my boss, and I actually went to I ended up getting my job here at Binance. Was I went to the MIT Bitcoin Expo as a student, and I just wanted to go there and network. I had a QR code as my wallpaper on my phone that took everybody to like my LinkedIn, my resume. I ended up meeting my eventual boss now, and now I've been working at Binance for I think 4 months today. So I think networking, Patrick hit it right on the nail. Very grateful for that day, and you never know what will happen when you meet someone new and the opportunities that will arise.
Yeah, and also just kind of a reminder, you guys do have questions. I know I've kind of just been looking at the screen, but if you guys do have questions, just like blurt them out. I want to hit on one more thing before we get into like your predictions for Web3, because that's pretty entertaining stuff. And you hinted at it, how there's like a million different ways for non-technical people and technical people as well to get into crypto. What would be some actionable advice that you would give of like, hey, I'm a college student, I'm a junior, everyone looks for an internship that eventually leads to a full-time job, and I want to get into crypto, but that isn't like a brightly lit path. How would you go about it as a non-technical student and as a technical student to eventually get a job in crypto?
So if you guys were, if I didn't put you to sleep with kind of my opening on what my path was, I think that'll probably shade what my advice here is. You just never know what is going to be your route to your end game, right? And more often than not, it is a very, very winding road, and it's not always certain. You just need to make sure you always have sort of forward progress, and understand that even sometimes a setback can be forward progress without you realizing it. And so, for instance, I in the early days really wanted to work at the State Department. I was like, oh my God, I want to work at the State Department. And with government, it's very straightforward. You want to work at the State Department, you take the written test, then you show up for an oral test, and then you get put on a wait list. And once the wait list is over, like, you either get into the State Department or, like me, you don't. And that's very linear. But life is outside the government is not linear. And in the end, I ended up going through policy. And even with the policy, I wasn't really working with world leaders. I was just kind of like, working for the EU. And then I ended up going to communications. The next thing you know, I was working directly with Tony Blair, and I got to work with Barack Obama. And I never thought that was going to be through a PR firm. It was really weird. And so always be on the lookout for what the periphery opportunities are, right? So if you want to get into, if you want to go and be an engineer at the world's largest blockchain company, right? If you don't get offered that job at Binance, take a look. What are the other periphery projects that okay, well, I want to work at Binance. Binance, I know I see that CZ is constantly talking about gamification, or he's talking about the importance on fixing vulnerabilities and bridges. Look for what those projects are that are operating in that space, some of those smaller projects, and apply to those, right? You don't have to go, it doesn't have to be a bright line to what your end game is. Just constantly be edging your way up. Same thing, let's say you want to work in comms. Go ahead and just Google it. What are the top PR firms that focus in blockchain? And you know what? Go and you'll find a bunch of companies. There's tons of them, and reach out to them. They're smaller companies. You can probably find email addresses. You can call their phone number and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. They'll probably throw you an application because we're dying for talent right now. And start out in one of those like smaller, niche PR firms. Same thing goes with marketing. Operations, you want to get in operations and you want to get into blockchain. You can't get into one of the big crypto companies. Take a look at one of the payment services companies, because that's where we end up recruiting out of, right? Look at things like PayPal, Revolut. We're stealing those guys all the time. So, don't be afraid to, if the one, initial goal doesn't work, take a look at what the broader ecosystem looks like and be willing to sort of work your way up towards that end goal. And maybe you end up, working at Binance, or maybe you end up in an entirely different route that's even better than what would have happened if you would have come here. You just never know. But at least you're always kind of driving forward, and you're always, maintaining that hunger, to continue to grow in your career, in your personal sort of path towards growth, whatever it happens to be. Yeah, that's always my advice. Just be nimble, be flexible, and just always keep your eye on moving forward, even if it's not as far forward or in the exact direction you thought it was going to be.
It's funny because that's pretty much the number one advice that Corey Levy gave to what he accredited his entrepreneurial success to, was to build forward momentum. And so no matter what, just keep building that forward momentum. So it seems like we might be hitting on something pretty important for us to take away. With that being said, I'd like to dive into your predictions and Binance's thoughts on just the future of Web3. And to start off, you were very, you said that joining Binance was a once in a lifetime opportunity to get on the ground floor for an emerging industry and something that could impact a lot of people's lives. What, especially when you were starting to learn about crypto and Web3 and that now, especially continues to excite you about the space and about working at Binance?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that excites me the most is the uncertainty. That can scare some people, but uncertainty is a beautiful thing. I had a colleague who I tried to bring over to Binance, and he got offered a rival position at Google, and he took the job at Google. And we've connected recently, and now he kind of regrets that. And here's why. Everything that's going to be built at Google, it's already been built. It was built by people 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer. Same thing at Amazon, right? You take a job in one of those companies right now, you're not an innovator, you're a caretaker. maybe you're investing and you're buying up other products to sort of fold into your ecosystem. But the real innovation is kind of gone, right? So when we look at Web3, we oftentimes talk about, oh, well, where's the use case for Web3, right? Other than crypto, which some people say, well, we'll see what happens with crypto. Regulators are going to regulate it into non-existence. They're not. We've been saying that since 2012. Crypto is going to continue to grow. It's going to iterate. It's going to be regulated in ways that will provide more consumer choice, while at the same time providing more consumer protections, and that's a good thing for crypto. But Web3 is an entirely different animal. And if you hear CZ talk, he'll say all the time, he'll say, listen, right now we're the largest crypto exchange. And people don't realize exactly how much larger we are. We are much larger than Coinbase or nearest competitor. But when you look at Binance as an ecosystem, we're also the third largest NFT platform, the second or third largest fan token platform right now. We have the largest VC fund. I think our VC fund rate of return was 3,100% over the last 3 years. We've incubated everything from Polygon, Axie Infinity to FTX. Someone that people would see as a competitor, all came out of the Binance ecosystem. And what CZ would say is that even though right now most of our revenue comes from the Binance exchange, he is fully prepared that maybe we don't even have an exchange in 10 years. And by the way, as the CSO now, former chief comms officer, I did not enjoy my CEO going out on CNBC and saying, "Hey, the big cash cow at our company, I might not even have that in 10 years." It's not great. I get a lot of follow-up questions from me on that. But he's being honest, because the future of Web3 is certain in its uncertainty, but certain in its potential. And what I mean by that is, even though today we have yet to really see what is that practical use case for Web3 and how it's going to impact people's daily lives in ways they don't understand, okay? That's when true widespread adoption happens. It happens when you don't notice it happening. You look back at 1993, right? And my company uses this all the time now, but this is originally my thing. So I'll let everyone know this. CZ has stolen this from me. Rohit, our CTO, has stolen this from me. This is mine, though. I remember when David Leonardman was interviewing Bill Gates live on TV. It was 1993. I was up with my dad watching it. My dad was a big computer guy. And I think Microsoft was going to be broadcasting the first ever audio of a live baseball game over the internet, which at the time was revolutionary. And David Letterman looks across the desk at him and he says, "Why do I need this? Haven't you ever heard of radio?" And, Bill Gates laughs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the beauty of that moment is that neither of those people, neither David Letterman nor Bill Gates, had any possible understanding on how the internet was going to change the way we operate as a society. That at some point, just 10 years later, people would be ordering taxi cabs, ordering food to their home. Oh, and by the way, all of our global economic infrastructure would be built on top of the internet. That was completely unforeseeable. Web3 is the exact same. It is not even 1993 for Web3. The internet was created really back in the 1960s. Technically, there's a lot of argument there. We didn't really see a use case happen until we would argue the late to mid to late 90s with internet transactions. That's when all of a sudden people started to pay using the internet without even realizing it, and their lives started to change. Then everyone started to have personal laptops, and now they're on the web constantly. It changed the way we act as students. It changed the way we engage, but no one could have seen that coming. Web3 has that same potential. It makes society more efficient, more important than anything else. It makes everything we do cheaper. So, for instance, a lot of people just don't fundamentally and you guys do. You're in this group, you understand this. But when I try and explain this to people, this is the way I explain it. If you want to donate $10 to somebody who has breast cancer, and you donate $10 through the Susan B. Komen Foundation. Susan B. Komen has all of these different overhead issues. They have campaigns they have to run for marketing purposes, the fundraise, and in the end, of that $10 that you are trying to get to the person who's suffering from this disease in the end, they're only getting about $1 of it. All that $9 is all just middleman costs. And Web3 allows us to both cut out the middleman on these things. So it makes our economy more efficient. It's also being used for things that people don't understand yet. So one of our biggest goals is to continue to expand in NFTs. But it has nothing to do with Bored Ape Yacht Club. It's all about Boeing. It's about Alfa Romeo. It's about Tesla. So what are they using them for? Well, Alfa Romeo is attaching an NFT to every single one of their electric vehicles, their new electrical vehicle fleet. What that means is that they can track the performance of an NFT of a car over the span of its lifetime, no matter where it gets worked on, no matter who buys it, without ever violating the privacy of who that owner is. They don't know who owns it. They don't know where the car is, but they can track whether that car is having issues with one of its battery systems, whether it's having issues with its dashboard, whether it's having issues with its recharge system. They can identify that almost by the minute at a global level across a massive fleet, so that when they're working on their next iteration of that car, they can go and start to make those changes, or they can initiate recalls well before there's actual potential loss of life scenarios. And so Web3 has all of these really unique practical use cases that we are just beginning to understand. But the underlying principle of it is really clear. All of the other issues around regulations, around the challenge of implementing blockchain solutions with more traditional computer systems, all of that is background noise. We had the same issues when the internet was coming up. In the end, because Web3 is so effective, both from a man or a woman power standpoint or from a cost standpoint, means that it will be successful. And anyone who tells you that it's not, that's going to be a passing fad, I'll tell you they've been telling you that for the last 12 years. And if that's the case, you wouldn't see companies like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan who are out of one side of their mouth saying, oh, all this crypto Web3 stuff, who knows? And then on the other side, they're closing deals at record pace to get into the industry while we're in this down market. So I think that's why we're so bullish on Web3. It's just we know the potential is there. And listen, whether Binance ends up being the next Google of Web3, we actually kind of hope not. Our hope is that there's many Googles and that every single year new innovations can be driven from the ground up and overtake big behemoths like us at a moment's notice. And that's kind of the beauty of blockchain. For those of you who are engineering and mathematically inclined, unlike myself, start a project. You never know what it's going to become. CZ started, this thing called Binance, and 6 months later, it was the largest crypto exchange in the world. And now we're larger than the New York Stock Exchange, the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and the London Stock Exchange combined. It's 4 years ago. So the opportunity is virtually limitless, and it allows for anyone in any sort of size and shape to enter and utilize these tools, which are fairly cheap and you don't have to go and buy a massive laboratory to go and build on a blockchain. So there's just so much opportunity there.
I'm sold. I've been sold for a little bit. Hopefully, maybe some people got sold. And from what it sounds like, is that this is just an industry that's growing incredibly fast and will affect a lot of other industries. And it doesn't really matter what your skill set is, or what specific industry you're interested in, like cars or something like that, because a lot of them, if they have middlemen, over time will be affected by it. And so if you can just position yourself by understanding blockchain's fundamentals, and maybe its applications within your niche, you can position yourself to be at the forefront of a company that you admire, because you have knowledge on a topic that is somewhat complex. And takes time to learn. So with that being said, right, the best way to get started is to start a side project or to start learning in public, right, if you're non-technical, in my opinion. And you guys have over, I think, $1 billion that you're holding to invest in Web3 projects over the next few years. What areas are you all keeping an eye on and looking out for that you would suggest people at U of I who maybe happen to be inclined to get into the industry should look into and start building around?
So you're actually asking the wrong question. That's what CZ would tell you. Because we don't look at projects to invest in based on what they're built. We don't say like, oh, okay, gamification is the new big thing. Let's find the best gamification companies. CZ and he, our two large co-founders, have a very specific way that they like to invest in our VC fund. And it's great. It's great news for all of you. Number one, they're looking for co-founders at the very beginning. We're not looking to things like Celsius and even Voyager, like those don't make sense for Binance.com. It's not what we're looking to do. We're looking for those founders who have a vision for their project, not because they think this is the hot new thing, but because they found a problem that they think that Web3 can solve. No matter how big or how small the problem is, they have a very clear understanding of the issue. They have a good potential practical use case of their blockchain product to help bring about either a solution set or just to move the ball forward to alleviate whatever that issue is. And they have a deep understanding on how to build a community of followers and a commitment to see a project through. So what I would say is, anyone who's interested in getting in the blockchain and want to build stuff, look at what everyone else is building. Look at where the issues are and find the thing that makes you passionate that you want to build on. That's what you should be doing. Because if somebody else is already doing it, it's too late. Think of something else you can go and work on. And there's no shortage of problems that have solutions in the Web3 space. It's just there's not enough people thinking about it right now.
That aligns well with the Line Up Blockchain's mission to get all of these smart people in the room to start thinking about these things. And hopefully we can provide you guys with some of the resources to develop a first principles understanding so you can actually make, informed decisions and pursue projects that could have some potential in the future. So kind of pivoting a little bit, I know the interview will wrap up pretty soon. I'm curious, related to specifically your job, and you hinted at this earlier with regulations about how crypto's not going to stop, but obviously there are countries that, depending on what regulations or perspectives they have, will benefit a lot from being the home of Web3 innovation. So in your opinion, you've gotten a lot of backer. There's probably nobody better to ask this question than you. What is the best mentality to have for a country that wants to leverage Web3 technology and make it the home of it?
Yeah, the race is kind of underway. Like 2 years ago, I think regulators and policymakers were kind of, do we want to have like this massive, Web3 crypto company like on our shores? Because when Binance is in your home state, it means those regulators had to respond to like local law enforcement. They had to respond to other things. It's just a lot of work. What has become quite clear for policymakers across the globe is that the opportunity that the Web3 sort of innovative space creates for them is a way to completely shift the balances of power globally. The US for a long time had sole ownership rights over the software space. And even before that, the hardware space. Maybe not hardware in the last 15 years, as China has been elevated, India has been elevated, but certainly in the software space. The US was frankly kind of slow to get moving, and they're still kind of slow. Europe is racing forward on this. The Middle East is racing forward to adopt and define a new regulatory framework where, again, crypto can both provide added security for users, and there's lots of room for us to grow there, lots. And it's why we're pro-regulation. But then also still allow for innovation, right? What sort of regulatory policies are good? Policies that provide assurances and insurance on users on money. We have our Seifu fund, which was the first ever in its industry. CZ coined the term Seifu, possibly by accident. We're not quite sure what the real story is. But we put aside a little over $1 billion in case we ever had a major issue that we had to go and pay users back on. That needs to be codified in law in some way, shape, or form, kind of like how the FDIC operates with traditional banking. Having clear rules on how things are marketed and how products are advertised, making sure the projects have certain required levels of transparency when it comes to investments. Those are all things that are really good. But you also need to make sure that we're able to build projects that are innovative, that are flexible, that test the boundaries of things. And we're still working with regulators to figure out exactly what does that mean when it comes to actual policy making. And those are the vast majority of the questions and the conversations that we have, whether it's with the SEC, FCA in the UK, BaFin in Germany, AMF in France, JFSA. We're all having the same conversations. It's okay. We know that we have to have additional security measures. We need to protect users, but how do you do that in a way that allows this industry to continue to grow? Because this space evolves so quick. Because again, one of you might create the next Binance in the next 3 months, and it might completely put the entire regulatory model on its head. We've seen that on multiple occasions. Look at what DeFi has done. DeFi has completely changed the way that regulators thought they were going to regulate crypto. So we need to figure out how we can work with policymakers to create a framework that's both stringent in what protections applies, but also nimble to adapt to however this industry is going to grow and sort of change in the years and months ahead.
Gotcha. I appreciate it. I have two more final fun questions, and also want to open the floor to anybody that has questions.
Take your time.
So I'll let you guys think of your questions so that there's not this sort of awkward silence, and I'll ask these. But get ready. So number one, if you could recommend any book, blog, or podcast for the audience, for a group of 70 college kids, what should we read or listen to?
On crypto stuff, I think Coin Bureau continues to be one of my favorites. I still listen to Guy all the time. He's really good at breaking down issues, helping understand the sort of the tactics and the strategy behind the tech. And so Coin Bureau is always one of my go-tos. So that would be me personally. That's what I'm listening to. I'm not saying it's the best. Some of you are probably way more advanced especially when it comes to the tech than I am. But that's what I listen to on a regular basis. A book that our CEO loves that I also really enjoyed is a book called No Rules Rules, which is about the founding and the sort of development of Netflix. It's a great book. There's lots of great key learnings there, I think, that we use at our sort of within our leadership team and how we run our business. But also there's some really great lessons just in how to evaluate the company you work for, how to work very nimbly, how to ensure you're allocating your resources appropriately, where to sort of focus your attention, what to obsess over, what not to obsess over. It's a really useful book.
Appreciate it. And then my final question before we get into a Q&A, if people have questions, hopefully you do, is general life advice. And I'm stealing this from Tim Ferriss, if anybody listens to the Tim Ferriss show.
Also a great podcast. I think CZ, they're trying to get him on right now.
Oh yeah. If you could put a quote on a billboard that anybody could read in any language, what would you put on it?
Oh man, now you might get awkward silence on my end. That's tough. Oh geez. Any quote.
Or just a phrase that you say to yourself. It doesn't necessarily.
There's a couple going through my head. I think the one that there's a couple that I use all the time. I use lots of quotes, and my team both loves and hates it. But I think one that has been that has proven true time and time again, and really kind of dictates how I think about things is famous philosopher Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and it's true. And as long as you accept that, as long as you're okay with the fact that your plan at some point is going to go completely pear-shaped, and you're confident in being able to work your way out of any problem that you need to again, continue that forward momentum, you're going to be all right.
That'd be good. Appreciate it. So with that being said, I'll open the floor. Who's got questions?
I just scream it out loud.
Yeah, I'll just repeat it too.
Sure. My question is, what is your opinion on central bank digital currencies as a substitute for crypto in some of the more regulated countries like maybe like the Western area, like America or Canada, or like some of the areas where it's not as open to blockchain compared to other countries like China or some of the more developing countries.
Cool. Yeah. So to repeat, if you didn't hear it, what is your opinion on central bank digital currencies, especially for Western nations with like a developed economy, as it compares to like traditional crypto?
Yeah, CBDCs. So it's interesting. So I'll give you my non-PR answer as Patrick Hillman, American citizen, not Patrick Hillman, employee at Binance. The U.S. government has been trying to create a payment system, a website to collect payments for the last 18 years. So literally, if you're a government employee and you want to go and just submit an expense report in any agency and be able to quickly get paid back out on that expense, it's taken them 18 years. It's still not been pulled together. Governments are amazing and can't be supplanted in some things. They're not usually built for speed, and they're not usually built for innovation. Bizarrely, authoritarian countries and dictators are much better when it comes to innovation because they can just tell the whole economy to just go. Most democracies, which is what we all live in right now, and hopefully everyone in that classroom has access to on a more regular basis, if you don't live full-time in the States. Most of us live in democracies which requires consensus, and consensus takes a lot of time. And there's the old saying that a camel is a horse by committee, and that is extraordinarily accurate in many different practical use cases in life. And so I think CBDCs are going to be really interesting to see how they grow. I think there's a real place for them, particularly when it comes to stablecoins and to eventually replacing stablecoins, or at least having a government-backed option in the stablecoin market. I think that's really interesting. But as far as it actually replacing traditional cryptocurrencies generally, I don't see it. And it's because somebody is going to put out a better product. And again, I'm an American citizen. I'm patriotic. I love this country. But somebody in Morocco might create a better product. And guess what? The United States not be able to say, users, you can't go into the DeFi space and purchase that product. If it's more stable, it shows better growth through economic turmoil. Guess what? People, corporations, they're going to move their money to that more stable product. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. Again, I think stable coins, it makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's going to get too much bigger than that unless governments completely rechange the way, their bureaucracy works, how they spend money, how they allocate money. It's tough. If we see something that's really interesting, we should go and work on that. CZ will take a budget and we'll move it that day. It doesn't have to go through multiple layers of Congress and committee hearings and then potentially a question from the court system, then back into the legislative branch, and then signed up by the president. It's a much simpler model in the private sector. And so I think governments will probably be a little bit challenged to get outside stable coins. Maybe I'll be wrong, though. Who knows?
We got time for probably 2 more questions. Yeah.
So given how fast technology moves in our day and age, and you mentioned that it's been 12 years since blockchain was introduced, why do you think it's still ground zero for this technology? Some people say that it's kind of too late, and people who put in the minutes.
I heard it. It's not too late. It's not too late. 10 years ago, people would have looked at companies like BitMEX. They would have looked at Coinbase, and they would have said, well, at Coinbase in particular, everyone would have said, well, Coinbase is going to be the big exchange. Like everyone else, abandoned hope all ye. Coinbase is it. They've got the most market share. They're a U.S.-based company. They're going to be going public. And then a little startup, 8 people in an office in Hong Kong, had a young leader who had experience working at Bloomberg, working on the terminal, and said, hey, I can build a better crypto exchange. And so he did. and that became Binance. And then Vitalik came around and created Ethereum. And then someone said, hey, you know what? Ethereum, Bitcoin are great, but we can create this thing called smart contracts. And smart contracts completely changed the way the industry operates today and basically opened up all these opportunities we never thought were possible. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on how you can utilize smart contracts for other practical use cases that we just haven't been able to think through yet. So it's very much the beginning. Again, we are just now kind of coming out of solely being focused on cryptocurrencies as a financial device or a monetary device. We haven't really started to really spend a lot of time and think about other sort of Web3 practical use cases. And I probably don't think like true widespread adoption is going to happen in the next 5 years. I think it's somewhere between the next 5 and 10. CZ would probably say it's the next 5. We disagree on that. He's usually right more than I am, though, so take that for what it is. But every single day we have a hard time keeping up with the industry. We have this big chat with 80 leaders in the company every day. All 80 of the leaders, we get on with CZ, and for 15 minutes we all talk about, hey, what are you seeing? What are you hearing in the industry? And it is almost like a mad dash every day to just try and not stay ahead of the curve, just to keep up with it. And so there's just no indication right now that this is doing anything but going to continue to explode over the next 10 years. I mean, it's exploding in the middle of a bear market. That means that it's going to really hit rocket ship level once we, see another bull market and we start to see capital start to come back into the industry. Only 6% of the globe is invested in crypto right now. 6% of the addressable globe, I should say, which means you have all of that market capitalization potential that's going to happen over time. So it's wide open.
Who's got the best question? All right, he raised his hand.
I could take 2 more. It's up to you guys. Don't worry.
All right, cool. Yeah, let's see if we get kicked out of the room. So I'm gonna go behind you, and then I'll go to you.
Awesome. So my question is about decentralization. In particular, like a lot of the blockchain crypto space very much has an ethos of decentralization, and like that's baked into the culture in a sense. And on the other hand, a lot of Binance.com, I believe, is still a centralized exchange. So how, like when you guys are building Binance and thinking about your next products, like how do you reconcile those two things? What are the trade-offs that are being made? And just how do you think about decentralization moving forward?
Yeah. So I got that one too, I think. So obviously FTX's founder just got savaged for this online. So I'm going to tread carefully here. I'm just kidding. I'll be very honest. So we don't think that Binance or an entity like Binance is the end game in Web3. We are invested in DeFi heavily. We made a massive investment in SushiSwap, among a whole host of other projects. We give to we invest in 80 to 100 projects every single year. And DeFi is where CZ and our entire leadership team firmly believes the industry wants to go to, right? It wants to go there. However, there are some significant benefits to having a more centralized organization in a decentralized environment. So what do I mean by that? So a more centralized, org like ours, it's still, media constantly say, oh, it's the wild, wild west. And I hate that because it's just used to say like, oh, there's no control there. There's plenty of control. But there are new scams that are constantly being, presented to the marketplace. And because we have so many new users that are joining constantly, they're highly prone to those scammers. And, for us, we believe that a more centralized exchange allows those new users to feel safer about entering the environment because we have a highly curated list of coins. We don't allow crap projects to get on. We go really deep into those projects, make sure that there's some there, that it's not going to be, a rug pull, as they say. The whole industry got Luna wrong, obviously, but that's a whole nother story. But we do everything we possibly can to avoid that. And the traditional markets had the same thing. And Ron, I mean, it happens in the traditional markets too. But we try really hard to provide those protections for people. And so a lot of new users are always going to look to come to those more centralized exchanges in the beginning before they venture out. Secondly, the biggest challenge we have as an industry from a crypto standpoint, not Web3, although to a certain extent Web3 too, is wallets. Wallets are still really complicated. I work at a crypto company. I'm an executive of a crypto company, and every time I have to give my wallet ID to transfer some of my crypto from one wallet to the other, I have sweaty palms. I'm freaking out the entire time. Always send $10 first before you do it. Do a test run, and you'll avoid sending a couple $1,000 to the wrong wallet by mistake. So that is another reason why right now, as the industry is still kind of getting settled, is still working on user design and user experience, these centralized exchanges are probably going to be a boon for the industry in the short term, probably for the next 10 years. But we expect that the new projects that are going to come up in the years ahead that are going to be more game-changing, they're going to chip away at our market share, is going to be these DeFi projects. Now, there's all sorts of other problems with DeFi that governments need to figure out, right? In a DeFi space, how do you ensure sanctions are being followed? How do you ensure, maybe you don't think sanctions should be followed? That's a whole other story. How does AML get done, right? Anti-money laundering. There's all these rules in the global financial system. Some of them are good, by the way. That can be very hard, at least the way DeFi exists today, to enforce. And so that's why we think, for today, a centralized exchange like Binance offers a lot of benefits. Also, we can get into liquidity pools and why it's important to have large liquidity pools to allow frictionless trading. So, if you want to buy something, there's a high likelihood someone's willing to sell it to you at that price. That all comes the benefit of a more centralized, model and exchange. At some point, that won't be the case. But today, for the vast majority of users, they feel safer and they're better protected in a more centralized exchange. We just had our hack that happened. We created the BNB chain. We gave it off to the community. Our suggestion to them was, it's up to you guys, grow it as you deem fit. We created the voting modules that would allow them to grow the number of validators on that chain, and they've been slowly growing it. But had that hack on that bridge happened in something like a completely decentralized chain, there would have been no way to stop those individuals from getting away with the lion's share of the money. But because they were a smaller, more centralized DeFi chain, all the validators were able to get literally on the phone together less than an hour later, call a vote, and vote to pause the chain. Something that was somewhat historic, but it saved a lot of users, a lot of projects, a lot of money. That was kind of a unique hack. Technically, they didn't steal money. They essentially broke into the Federal Reserve, printed new money, and then walked out the door with it. So they didn't actually steal money. They watered down the value of the existing money by creating new money and then leaving with it. But because they were able to lock down that chain, while these people would have been able to walk away with 500 million in a normal environment, they only got out with 100 million, and they were able to even lock down that 100 million. So there's zero impact to the user. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so I know you went into a lot of depth earlier, kind of going into why Web3 and blockchain could revolutionize, or has the potential to revolutionize the landscape like in 5 to 10 years. And I think a lot of college students and a lot of people in general that are familiar with the technology realize its potential. And I've even bear witness to a couple of buddies of mine that have kind of thought of startups like with that Web3 perspective or vision in mind. So I guess my question is, and simultaneously, like a lot of people want to learn more and more, not just like through surface level, but like to the extent where they would actually be able to innovate with that amount of knowledge about Web3 and whatnot. So my question is, how do you recommend people that are like truly web curious, blockchain curious, to learn about this type of stuff in its like fullest form? Because they may not always find like a rich, like full sense of information just by searching it up online.
So I'm not on the tech side, but I'm going to steal an answer that Rohit, our CTO, gave recently to a very similar question. And he said that every single successful product ever developed was built on the bones of 1,000 dead projects. And so his advice was always to go out, and if you are interested in getting into the engineering or the product design or product development, side of the industry, create an idea, no matter how small it is, even if you don't think it's the best idea, build it. Start building something. You're going to fail. And as long as you fail fast, and what we mean by that is if you take a product as far as it can go, it's just not working. Okay, reset, take a step back, look at what worked in that product, what didn't work, whether it's a coding issue, whether it's a market issue, whether it's a marketing issue, you couldn't get the user base to utilize it, figure out why, and then take those learnings and start another new project and fail, and another new project and fail and fail and fail and fail. Eventually, you're going to find that product that is going to resonate. It might not be a home run. Maybe it's just a first base hit, but you'll either take that product and you'll be able to grow it, or you'll take all that information and experience you got in building that product and you'll go work at a larger company and you'll help them build attributes on that project in their own larger product suite. You never know. But the only way you get there is by trial and error. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and then to add two things to that. Number one is we have a ton of resources available that we've created and that we use internally for Illini blockchain. Specifically, I think at least we'll get into this, or Muskan, but the Web3 Starter Pack. So it's on our public Notion site, which you can find in like our links in all of our social medias. But that is the resource that we use for our boot camp for new members. So if you want to get a fundamental understanding of the space, like that is the best way to go. And then number two, we're going to host a big hackathon with like a bunch of VCs and jump trading, which I hinted at. That if you are working on a project, like that is a great platform for you to present. That'll be in the spring sometime, but as some sort of extra motivation for you to get started, like you will have an opportunity to present to some of the top VCs in crypto. And with that being said, I'd like to thank you, Patrick, for coming on. This was like a nice hour out of your time. I know being the Chief Strategy Officer of Binance comes with a lot of opportunities. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and impart some wisdom on us. With that being said, can we give Pat a round of applause?
Now, listen, thank you guys so much. I love doing this. I can't reiterate. We're coming into a tough economy, and I know that hits new students that are coming out into the job world, and I'm sure there's lots of anxiety around that. But just like for me, as now somebody who's past their prime and is now moving into a different stage of their career, for a group of students like you who want to start an exciting new career, there was no industry like this when I came out of college. Facebook and social media had already gone through like 3 different hiring phases. Social media was very much in its phase 2 or phase 3. This is just getting started. So there's so much opportunity. It just really all kind of comes down to you folks and remaining passionate and finding what motivates you and, getting that first or second failed project under your belt so that you can just keep driving forward. And I promise there's no shortage of opportunity. Good luck.
Thank you. All right. Yeah.
See you.